Hi, thanks for watching my video. Let's get into it. So, what do you do? How do I answer that question the right way? This is something that I've really struggled with. It's something that I, I I've botched this 100 times, and so I wanted to use this exercise to kind of go deeper and think about that as I change my, reinvent myself again with going after the coaching and the consulting and the culture development. So, what do I do? In reality, I do a lot of things. For me, I must forget the elevator pitch. I've only got about 3 seconds. My answer to the what do you do question must instigate a follow up question like how or why or what. And so my goal is to have a meaningful conversation. So these are my seeds and my gardening icons, which you'll see throughout, and I'll go through those in a minute. What I'm doing is I'm actually planting some seeds when I'm telling a story, and I'm attempting to be intentional about planting the right seeds. Did my seeds sprout? I want evidence to see if my seeds sprouted, and that evidence comes in a follow-up question. Then I'm going to do some gardening if my seed sprouts. I'm going to ask some follow-up questions and check on the growth of that seed. What I'm wanting to see is a young plant. I want to make a connection with somebody, and I want to see what kind of connection it is. And the reaction to the story will tell me what kind of plant or relationship I have. I unlock people. That's the answer to the question. What do you do? I unlock people. Now, in somebody else's mind, when I say that, they're thinking, how do you do that? What do you mean by that? How is that relevant to me? And they're trying to put that in a place or a box in their brain, and they have difficulty doing that. So what they need to do is ask a follow-up question. And typically after they ask that follow-up question, what I will say is, do you really want to know, or are you just making conversation? I'd love to tell you what I do, but first, can I ask you a question? And I want to take a sincere interest in what they do. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do? They're going to give me an answer, and I'm going to go a little deeper. I'm going to say, tell me more about that. Well, how did you come to that role or that position or your job that you're in? And what do you really like about it? And then I'll also ask, what are some of the challenges a new person would have in that role? Because what I'm trying to do is build this relationship, and I can't do it if I'm just one-sided and telling. I've got to really get to understand them. At some point in that, they're going to turn around and talk to me, and they're going to say, can you tell me a little more about what you do? Help me understand what you mean by unlocking people. I'll say, can I give you a little bit of a context before I tell you my story? If you have a combination lock, it will only open if you have all the numbers in the correct order. People or teams often need that last number to unlock something. It could be for performance or internal peace or potential or productivity or provision. Then I go into my story. The reason I do a story and not speak exactly what I do is people can remember stories, and it gives context. In September 2012, I'm sitting on the plane. I'm getting ready to fly out to Washington to speak at a conference. Coming down the aisle is a young man in a ping hat, and he has a book in his hand about the inner game of golf. And he sees the last seat on the plane, and he comes and sits there. And that happened to be the seat right next to me. I discovered that it was his last semester of college, and he was really frustrated. He was frustrated with his professors, his work schedule, his workload. He was a really good golfer, and he was on a scholarship at the University of Illinois. And we discussed the stress that he was under and the mental game of golf. Luke was competing in a very high-stakes tournament this weekend and next. I told Luke a personal story about his head game and stress, and I encouraged him to put a couple things in writing. He said he would, and I told him to do it right now. He wasn't expecting me to be so bold, And in fact, he seemed a little bit uncomfortable about that. But he was a good sport, and he started typing that in his iPad, and then we talked about it. Finally, the plane landed. We exchanged numbers, and I told him I would check back with him. When we connected a couple weeks later, his whole life had changed. He was so grateful for our discussion and our time on the plane, and he was really happy that I called. He won those 2 tournaments. He actually hit a hole-in-one, and he was ranked number 1 on the Korn Ferry Tour. That meant he qualified to be on the PGA Tour for 2013. The following year, he got to play with all of his heroes, including Tiger Woods. He made $1 million, and I would watch him on TV competing with the best golfers in the world. He had fulfilled his lifelong dream, and he was on the PGA Tour. Now, the discussions and the tools that Luke and I went through were the last digits of the combination he needed to unlock his game of golf and compete at such a high level. We've spoken many times since. He was so grateful I took the time and the interest in him. So that's what I do. I either do that as a mentor, a coach, or a consultant. You look like you have a question. That long pause, if they don't ask a question, I prompt them to ask a question. And that's the dance that I go through, or in my head, the perfect vision of how to answer that question. What do you do? If you go back, I have 4 parts of this. There's a setup, where I'm setting the stage. I'm going through a challenge. Every story has a challenge or a struggle or a tension. And then I have to resolve that, a happy ending. And then at the end, I've got to tie it back into how do I unlock people. I've got to do that conclusion. After that, if I sit down with this person a year from now, they will probably remember that story. That's it. And that's my peak of the week.